Hi everyone. I'm not in a good mood today. Let's just see if I can get through this video alive. Hollywood is dead, and I'm not saying that as an exaggeration. I'm not saying that as, a jab against them. I mean, they're probably legitimately dead right now. And the theatrical experience, unless some miracle happens, might not exist for many more years, because the worst case scenario that could have possibly happened with WB being sold, and it was already a bad scenario in the first place, but the worst case scenario was that Netflix would buy WB, and that has happened. Now, there's still a 12 to 18 month window before the deal closes. There are appeals to the government right now about just how this will destroy an ecosystem, how this will be bad for business. But if some sort of appeal gets through and this breaks apart, then I'm all for that, but I'm not holding out hope for it right now. But yes, the news came rather shockingly and suddenly some hours ago that Netflix had succeeded in its bid for Warner Brothers, and David Zaslav just did not care in selling Warner Brothers, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, and most, the studio with the most history and the most iconic movies ever, perhaps only apart from Disney, just getting sold off as another IP to be mined apart by Netflix. So I think I'm going to get a lot of people in the comments, because my channel for the past couple of years has primarily cataloged the decline of Hollywood and everything going wrong. And with that, you get people from different perspectives. And there's a lot of people who are just straight up disillusioned by Hollywood. They haven't seen a movie in theaters in 15 years. They dog on the entire experience. They say that their at-home movie theater setup is better and all of that. If you think that this is good, or that you are jeering Hollywood's demise in this way, I'm gonna slap you down and shut you down on that right now and just tell you how horrible this is. So first of all, the big problem with this is Netflix is not motivated by keeping theaters open. And I'm going to explain in a minute why theaters were key to the quality of movies, and just explaining that in a second here. Netflix is, once again, the CEO is motivated by getting people to sign up and stay subscribed to Netflix. And that's understandable. That's the entire business. Ted Sarandos, the CEO of Netflix, has said in the past that movie theaters are an outdated concept. He has really bashed the use of theaters in the past. And it's understandable, once again, that would be his main goal, is to keep people subscribed to Netflix. So I'll explain it all in a second. But basically, that's the big fear, is that if Netflix was to buy Warner Brothers, that means no more Warner Brothers movies in theaters, no more Batman movies in theaters. Warner Brothers is what owns the DC catalog. No more Superman movies in theaters. Theaters just got a big win this year with the Minecraft movie that was distributed by Warner Brothers. No more of those hits in theaters anymore, because Netflix only cares about keeping people subscribed to Netflix. Now, in the wake of theaters collapsing, that is what part of the appeal is, in terms of how much competition and business will be taken away if Netflix buys this. Ted Sarandos is trying to quell those fears, though, by saying that Warner Brothers movies will remain in theaters, but windows will evolve to be much more consumer-friendly. Now, what could he possibly mean by that? Well, let's read the quote in more context. Netflix's Ted Sarandos says Warner Brothers movies will remain in theaters, and Netflix has no opposition to movies in theaters. Well, he said much differently not too many months ago. My pushback has been mostly in the fact that the long exclusive windows, which we don't really think are that consumer-friendly, I wouldn't look at this as a change in approach for Netflix movies or for Warner movies. I think over time the windows will evolve to be much more consumer-friendly, to be able to meet the audience where they are quicker. I'd say right now you should count on everything that is planned to go to the theater through Warner Brothers will continue to go through the theaters through Warner Brothers, and Netflix movies will take the same strides they have, which is some of them do have a short run in the theater beforehand, but our primary goal is to bring first-run movies to our members because that's what they're looking for. So a lot of, gobbledygook and messing around to just say their goal, which I've always understood, is to put movies on Netflix because their goal of the Netflix CEOs is Netflix. So while they now are playing nice and saying that Warner Brothers movies are going to continue to play in theaters, their goal is to shorten those theatrical windows, even though we were finally getting away from that, and shorten them so that they just eventually all wind up on Netflix because that is their priority. So this is horrible for a company or a studio like Warner Brothers that has such a history of bringing the best movies to theaters, perhaps not as much recently. They were the one studio that was able to turn a profit this year. And basically being bought by Netflix and stripped for parts. If you think that this isn't just Netflix farming more IP off of things like DC and Harry Potter and whatnot, then I have a bridge to sell you. This is like giving your prized car that you've kept, you've never driven, you've polished for years, and you give it to a parts dealer and tell them, keep it nice, and expecting that they're not just going to strip it for parts and selling it. Now, with all of that, once again, I'm going to go back to the people who maybe are laughing right now and laughing at Hollywood's demise and the demise of theaters. Theaters, by the way, who didn't ask for any of this. This is not good. Now, the main thing that we can all agree on this channel, if you're subscribed, is we all agree on the decline of quality in Hollywood, the decline in movie quality, the decline in how these franchises and characters we love and how they are treated. Guys, streaming is the one of, if not the most reasons for that decline of quality. I know you might say, no, it's actually because of political ideology and how the culture war is divided and how they think that they need to push this and that. Well, streaming facilitated that. As I've explained in other videos, in my TV video, let me explain it again here. Hollywood, whether it was TV and movies, they used to have a system that incentivized quality. The government had made, acts back in the late 1940s that basically put the studios in competition with each other, made sure that there was competition. TV was in competition because their system of success was ratings. Basically, back in the day, with the theatrical system and TV, it was a system of put up or shut up. You have to create quality stuff to keep people watching. You have to create quality stuff to keep people in theaters and stay in competition with the other studios. You have to keep quality stuff to keep people watching so that your ratings are up. That's how it used to be, because back in the day, you didn't know if a TV show or a movie would be successful, and if one was successful, the next one could be a failure. So you had to put up or shut up. You couldn't alienate any portion of your audience. You had to make sure that that was successful. Now we can see the decline of quality and a lot of other things like, the culture war and maybe alienating certain audiences and all those kinds of stuff, the stripping apart of franchises. We can see that also coincide with the rise of streaming services. Now, what happened with streaming services is the competition and the system that was in place before with Hollywood and that incentivized quality was torn apart. All of a sudden, there was a consistent revenue stream that would come from streaming subscriptions. You no longer had to wring your hands over whether the next movie was going to succeed or the next movie was going to fail and make sure that you would do everything you could to make sure it wouldn't fail. Now you had a consistent revenue stream to fall back on, something that Hollywood had never had before with these streaming services, with the subscriptions. And this is what took away the competition. This is why we get a lot of streaming shows that no one wanted. This is how Hollywood was all of a sudden at liberty to give the middle finger to their audiences if they wanted to. Now they had the consistent revenue stream from the subscriptions behind the scenes, and they could always fall back and count on that. That means you get a lot of shows that no one asked for that can just be produced and sit on the streaming services because people are going to stay subscribed for other things, right? That is how were able to think that they could get away with making things that were vanity projects or for political purposes just to spread certain messages, because the revenue will always flow in from the subscriptions from people always signed up to get previous things, or maybe one show or movie that they like to continuously watch, like K-pop Demon Hunters is only available on Netflix. And that is what destroyed the competition of Hollywood. They no longer had to make shows and movies that had to perform on their own terms to keep ratings and keep people watching, because now it's all just content, endless pieces of content all about the streaming service. And they're not there to keep you watching one show or one movie like they used to be. They're there to keep you just overall subscribed to the service. And so what they need is more content, and they can afford to have a lot of bad pieces of content on there that doesn't respect its audience, as long as people are staying subscribed. So that is what the big reason, if not the biggest reason, for why you see a decline of quality in movies and TV, because that would come to movies as well, because all of a sudden the theatrical people were seeing how much money Netflix was making and seeing, we want some of that. And that's how you get other streaming services, none of them which were as successful as Netflix, that cropped up, because their idea was, look at what happened to Marvel and Star Wars and how there was an attempt to make them just streaming service content and the decline of quality there. But that reflected on the movies themselves, because now movies were being made with the idea that they are eventually going to just sit on streaming services and be content for streaming services. And as I've described in my video on TV before, there's also a different way that streaming services have been making their content. True, sometimes you get something that's really well made, just like theatrically sometimes you get something that's really well made still. But streaming services, once again, they prioritize keeping people subscribed and keeping people on the streaming service for as long as possible. And that's how you get second screen content. That's how you get literal proof that Netflix has been sending out word for people to dumb down the shows, to make sure that they can be heard in the background. So you have characters who will say super obvious things happening in the plot, because the idea is now the streaming services are making shows that can be played in the background when somebody's doing something else. And that's how the attention to detail and the care and the craft that used to go into movies and shows is gone now. And once again, that has extended to movies themselves, because many of them are made with the intention that they will eventually just be more streaming service content. Now, here is the thing. You might say that this was all inevitable and that we had lost the competition and the incentive to make quality and the incentive not to insult your audience. There was hope, it would seem. I had a video recorded and I was going to release it, and now it's defunct now, about how Paramount at least was saying things that sounded really good. They were actually going to prioritize putting more movies in theaters. They were going to prioritize making movies for middle America again. They were going to prioritize more action movies with traditional action heroes. They were going to prioritize comedies. Like, comedies have disappeared in the past decade, and they're now just trying to make a comeback. Like, Paramount, all the things I was reading, at least on paper, sounded good from Paramount. They were trying to buy Warner Brothers. And so that sounded good on that front. Like, Paramount was maybe finally a light at the end of the tunnel, and they were going back into put up or shut up mode, where if you weren't performing in the way that they wanted you to the standards that they wanted you to, you were out of there. It sounded like Paramount might have been at least on a right track to getting us out of the hellhole that we've been in for the past decade or more. But now Netflix comes along and ruins all of that, because they can say what they want to say to sound good, because there is a dispute over this right now with the government that this is just going to kill an entire marketplace, and that Netflix is going to do that. And so Netflix is under the gun on that front, where they want this deal to go through. I think they're going to say what sounds good. So as of now, they're going to keep stuff in theaters, and they're going to keep theaters alive on that. But make no mistake, Netflix's priority is Netflix. They make all their money there. They have no incentive to put things in theaters. But with that, I believe goes away the incentive for quality, because that was one of the biggest problems with why quality had declined in movie theaters, is because it was becoming more and more skewed towards streaming services and these endless streams of revenue. And we got they circumvented the original systems that were put in place that made competition between studios. What we needed, and I am a defender of theatrical. Theatrical is what gave movies value. Before streaming services, you had to actually perform well to put movies in theaters and to get people to come and see them. You couldn't just fool around and try to give the middle finger to half of your audience and expect your movie to make money. No, you had incentives in place. Theaters gave movies value in other ways, though, when it was considered this event for people to go to and, this escape from your everyday life. Like, I think that people crafted movies with more detail and with more attention to the craft and more skill, because it was this idea that it would be a special experience for a while in theaters. A movie used to be a movie, but with the rise of streaming services, the goal was just to make more pieces of content. And you see that attention to detail disappear apart from some select filmmakers who still care about that craft and attention to detail and care about the experience. Once movies are just another disposable catalog that is digitized, their value, they've been devalued. They've been devalued from what they were before. Once they're just another catalog of digital content that sits on your computer, and maybe you don't even watch all that much, but maybe it just sits there for the occasion that you want to watch something and it has what you want. That's the big fear here, and I hope people understand that things are not going to get better because of this. DC is probably just going to eventually become stripped down from, these movies that could be released in theaters like The Dark Knight and The Batman to just more streaming content. That's what it's going to be. And it's not going to help the value of these things at all. It's just going to be stripped down until Warner Brothers is just a name for the history books, and all of these things, should Warner Brothers choose to keep it, is just more stripped down IP for their streaming service, just blending into everything else. This is not good, and movies are just being more devalued than ever. Netflix's only goal of releasing things in theaters as of now, as happened with Frankenstein and K-pop Demon Hunters, is just to get awards. There's no real incentive for them to keep things in theaters as of now, unless some miracle happens, unless they finally see the value of it or the profit of it, which I just don't think that it's going to be more profitable to them rather than their massive backlog of subscriptions, or if there's some sort of rule put in place that does help competition, that if Netflix truly wants to keep Warner Brothers, they have to release these things in theaters, that goes in place. But right now, it's looking like this is as close to actual true death, like funeral death of Hollywood, as we've ever gotten before, and the death of theatrical, and it's not going to help anything. But I'm curious to see the comment section under this video, and if people can actually realize how bad this actually is, or if you're just a couch potato who wants to just laugh at an entire industry going under, one of the biggest industries most iconic industries that America used to have. But that's all I got for you guys today. If you like my work, please sign up for Patreon and membership, and I will see you guys next time.